My name is Commander Arden Whitlow, United States Navy. For 30 years, I believed my father died a hero, lost in a mission no one would talk about. But a few months ago, during a simple ceremony, I opened an old command journal and saw something that stopped my heart. His signature, written in fresh ink. Since that moment, I've learned that some ghosts don't haunt you. They call you to finish what they couldn't. The morning light in Norfolk sliced through the glass panels, catching dust and brass, painting the hallway in stripes of authority. Every shadow in the Hall of Honor seemed to salute. I stood beside the command journal, the pages gleaming under a polished lamp. It was supposed to be a simple ceremony. No surprises, no ghosts. Never mistake silence for peace, my father used to say. His words came back to me as I reviewed the schedule, the hum of the air system vibrating faintly under my boots. Silence had always been my comfort. Today it pressed on me like a warning. Lieutenant Theo Marin hurried over, clutching a clipboard that looked bigger than his arm. "Commander Whitlow," he said, breathless. "Vice Admiral Morse just arrived." I nodded, straightened my collar, and exhaled. Routine is safety, the kind that keeps a soldier from thinking too long. When Morse entered, applause echoed politely against the walls. He looked smaller than the photographs that lined the corridor. Medals, stories, triumphs reduced to brass and frames. He greeted me with a brief salute. "You keep this place in good order, Commander." "Yes, sir," I answered. My tone was formal, detached. I wasn't here for sentiment, I was here for protocol. Marin handed him the pen. Morse leaned over the journal, steady but slow. I watched the ink flow. Black, deliberate. Then just beneath the line he signed, another name caught the light. Elias Whitlow. For a second, everything inside me froze. The name looked exactly as I remembered from childhood birthday cards. The rising W, the small curl at the end of the T. But next to it was the date. April 15th, 2022. My father disappeared in 1991. Declared MIA, body never recovered. For 30 years, that name had been carved on a stone in Arlington. The pen in Morse's hand trembled. His glass of water tipped, scattering shards in silence. He didn't even look down. "You weren't supposed to see that," he whispered. Then he turned, nodded once to Marin, and left through the side door without another word. I couldn't breathe. The room still smelled of polish and metal, but beneath it was something sharper: deceit. I closed the book, locked it, and forced my voice steady. "Dismissed, Lieutenant," I said. "Good work today." That night, long after the lights dimmed, I came back. No uniform this time, just a hoodie and my old access card. The hallway was colder without ceremony. The journal lay under its glass case, waiting. I bypassed the alarm, lifted the cover, and turned to the page again. The ink hadn't faded. I compared it to the letters my father had sent from Bahrain in '89, same slant, same looped W. It wasn't a forgery, it was a message. My pulse hammered. Someone wanted me to find it, someone who knew I'd be the officer overseeing that ceremony. It wasn't a coincidence. I switched on the terminal beside the display to cross-check visitor logs. Morse's clearance should have been there, stamped and timed. I scrolled through the records, eyes narrowing. His name was missing. The database ended a full day before the ceremony. Someone had erased him. The hum of the building deepened, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stared at the blank screen, my reflection staring back. Uniform gone, certainty gone. If the records could lie, then so could everything else I'd sworn to protect. And somewhere in this building, buried under protocol and polished brass, was the truth about my father. The last man to see my father alive opened his door before I could knock, as if he'd been waiting 30 years. The salt air hit first, then the quiet. Chesapeake Bay lay out like a sheet of hammered metal, gulls carving pale arcs against a sky that couldn't be bothered to care. I told myself I was here for an audit follow-up, nothing more. But Morse's whisper from the Hall of Honor kept threading my thoughts, the way a hairline crack snakes across glass. You weren't supposed to see that. His porch boards gave a soft, tired creak as he pulled the door open. I knew you'd come, he said, stepping aside. The house smelled of dust, old paper, and sea rope. Faded flags hung above a mantel crowded with photographs where men grinned from younger faces. Medals glinted without pride. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass and slid it toward me. We didn't drink. Silence gathered in the room like a third person. When he finally spoke, his voice had the rasp of a saw through wet wood. 1991, he said. Project Tidesparrow. Caldwell Dynamics falsified safety data on navigation modules. Your father refused to sign off. He studied my face, as if bracing for impact. So I made him disappear. The glass in my hand went colder. You faked his death. I buried the investigation and the man they'd have killed to keep it buried. His eyes found the window, following a gull to the horizon. Others profited. Rear Admiral Corwin Vance among them. He kept the contracts clean on paper and filthy underneath. My mother's voice rose out of memory, steady as a metronome. I kept quiet so you could live. Don't make my silence your prison. I set the glass down. And you broke every rule to give him a chance. I broke them because the rules were being used to break better men. He reached to a side table, fingers careful on a sealed envelope marked in my father's hand. He sent this 6 months ago. Said I should give it to you if the past found you before he could. The wax felt warm against my palm. I broke the seal and unfolded 3 pages dense with a hand I'd learned to read before I learned to ride a bike. He didn't apologize. He explained. The modules were bad, the money worse, and the threats came with polite smiles. He wrote that he'd taken a new name and a small life because small lives attract less fire. He wrote he was living aboard a 30-foot vessel called the Meridian Star out of Wilmington. And in one line that made my throat close, he wrote, "Truth survived longer than I did." I turned the final page. The last line sat alone, neat and spare. An alphanumeric coordinate, followed by a single word. Proof. Morse watched me absorb it, his jaw clenched, the years heavy on him. They're watching again, he said. You open this door, you don't get to close it neatly. I never expected neat, I said. I tucked the letter inside my jacket, feeling its weight like a badge I hadn't earned yet. Outside, the bay wind pushed at the eaves, impatient. I stood. Morse didn't follow, didn't offer a handshake. He only looked at the floor and said, I should have told you sooner. It sounded like a man nailing shut his own confession. I walked to my car with the envelope against my ribs and a longitude burning in my head. The engine turned over, the radio came alive and I shut it off. The road back from the water was a ribbon of cracked asphalt between marsh and memory. I checked the mirror out of habit. A black SUV follows me from the Bay Road. I'd spent half my life protecting secrets. Now I was chasing one that refused to stay buried. The highway unspooled toward Wilmington under a sky the color of cooled steel. Every exit sign felt like a quiet nudge from the line in my father's letter. Truth survived longer than I did, pulling me south the way a compass drags a needle. By the time I reached the marina, dusk had turned the water to tarnish. Heat clung to the pilings. Rope and diesel left a metallic taste in the air. A dock light over a narrow slip flickered as if arguing with the dark. The name on the transom caught the last of the light. The Meridian Star. No one moved. No radios, no laughter from the pier. Just the slow knock of small waves against a hull that had learned patience. I stepped from planks to a narrow gangway, boots whispering on wood, and called once into the quiet. You shouldn't have come here, Arden. The voice came from the shadow of the cabin, older, weathered, and familiar in a way my bones recognized before my mind consented. He stepped forward. Sun had left his hair. Salt had left his skin. The eyes hadn't changed. We didn't close the distance we stood in it, we stood. Inside, he said, lamps low. The cabin smelled of oil and coffee. A map lay open beside a chipped mug. A small fan ticked with irregular patience. He kept his hands visible, not out of fear, but out of habit, like a man who had lived too long where gestures were read as quickly as words. I heard my own breathing and the small clatter of a halyard tapping a mast somewhere outside. He spoke first. Tidesparrow was supposed to keep sailors alive. Caldwell Dynamics doctored the tests. Rear Admiral Vance smoothed the paperwork. I refused to sign what could drown good men, so they made me disappear. His voice wasn't dramatic. It was careful, as if each syllable might bruise the air. What did you have to prove it? He reached for a brass compass, its lid polished by years of thumbs, and pressed it into my palm. When I opened it, the needle trembled, then settled. Beneath it, a shaved sliver of storage nested in a machined recess. Proof, he said. Original diagnostics. Off-book memos. A voice you'll recognize when you play it. He didn't say Vance. He didn't have to. Outside, an engine turned over in the far lot. Too steady to be coincidence. Too patient to be a fisherman. He stilled, listening the way sailors do, with the skin. They followed you, he said. Then I'll leave, and they'll follow me away from you. I tucked the drive into the seam of my jacket and closed the compass, feeling the small click like a vow. I'm not letting them decide where this ends. On the pier, I called my mother. Wind worried the line. Mom, it's me. Her answer came taut and thin. They came by the house last night. No names, no rank, just the fact of footsteps and questions and the wrong kind of courtesy. Pack a bag, I said. Go to Aunt Ruth's, today. I've kept quiet for a long time, she whispered. I can keep quiet longer. Not this time. I didn't push more. Fear is stubborn, love is patient. I promised to call when I cleared the city and ended the line before either of us broke. Night took the marina in one long breath. I slid behind the wheel, pulse riding the beat of the idling engine, and eased off the gravel in a slow roll meant to look like indifference. In the mirror, a pair of headlights blinked awake and settled in 2 car lengths back. Unhurried, certain. I let them have the distance, took the first turn, and then the second, drawing a thread through warehouses and low offices, until the river fell away behind me and the road opened into the empty lanes of the bypass. My phone vibrated in the console. The lock screen showed our secure channel. Theo's tag, the green bar of encryption active. I didn't answer on speaker. I didn't answer at all. I read the preview once, then again, and felt the night tilt a few degrees toward the inevitable. Ma'am, I think I found something in Morse's data. You need to see this, now. They said the Navy runs on integrity, but the truth runs on who dares to keep the receipts. Morning cracked clean over Norfolk, all glass and ceremony, but the conference hall felt like the inside of a held breath. I stood at the end of a long table where flags drew polite lines between enemies who hadn't declared themselves. Legal pads, microphones, the hush of expensive pens. I opened with protocol, dates, authorizations, the language of steadiness, and entered for the record an ethics audit under the authority of naval security. A court without a bench, but a courtroom all the same. Vance sat opposite, pressed blues, calm mouth. He stared at me as if I were a junior officer confusing grief for duty. Commander Whitlow is emotionally compromised, he said, turning to the board. Her father's disappearance is tragic, but she is constructing conspiracies from routine contracting. I'm not constructing anything, I said. I'm opening the file cabinet. I played a sliver of Morse's deposition first. Dates, project codes, why he'd sealed what he could not save. The room held its posture, Then the door at the back opened, and Lieutenant Theo Marin slid in, a file clamped to his chest like a rescue buoy. He angled toward me, eyes steady, and set a drive in my hand. "Decrypted from Morse's USB," he whispered. "Chain of custody preserved." I connected it, and the speakers filled with the metallic grain of a room from 30 years ago. A voice cleared, a paper slid, and then an old, confident baritone cut through the static. "No one will ever see Whitlow's report. Sign it, or I'll bury the whole ship." Gasps rippled the length of the table. Someone's pen tapped once and quit. Vance's jaw didn't move, but the color did. "Manufactured audio," he said. "Convenient." Morse pushed himself to standing, the cane he didn't carry visible in the tremor of his hand. "It was me," he said to the board, "not to Vance. I buried him. To save him. I falsified the transport report so you couldn't find him before I could get him out. If you need a name for the rule I broke, write mine in ink." The room erupted. Board members talking over counsel, counsel over themselves, the thin sound of reputation slipping on tile. I let it crest. Then I raised a palm and waited until the noise collapsed under its own weight. "Request for full federal review," I said. "Immediate stand-down of relevant Caldwell Dynamics contracts pending inquiry, preservation orders on all Tidesparrow materials, and a protective directive for surviving witnesses." Vance leaned in, voice low enough to be intimate, cold enough to burn. "You don't know what you're lighting, Commander." "I know what it's already burned." The chair cleared his throat, and, with the careful diction of a man aware of cameras, announced the formation of an external review and the temporary suspension of procurement approvals within the scope of Tidesparrow-era documentation. It wasn't victory, it was daylight. When the session adjourned, the room exhaled. People stood in packets of quiet argument. Morse drifted to my side, the lines of his face deeper than when the day began. He pressed a thin, sealed drive into my palm. "If anything happens to me, you finish this." His eyes found mine. "Don't half die like I did." We stepped toward the glass, where October made everything look clean. The first bang didn't sound like an explosion so much as a door slamming the wrong way. The second tore the air. Heat licked the windows, alarms spilled red. Outside, flames swallowed a sedan in a bloom of orange and black. Metal shrieked, and then there was only the roar. Someone shouted for evac, someone else prayed into their sleeve. I didn't remember moving, only that my hand went to the drive and stayed there as if that could hold him here. Security burst through the side doors, smoke pressed against the glass like a body trying to come in. Marin gripped my arm hard enough to anchor me. His face was the color of paper, his voice exact. "They just made it official, ma'am. This is war." They buried him with full honors, the same honors he once thought I didn't deserve. December light poured through the Hall of Honor, glazing the portraits in quiet fire. I pinned my father's service bar above my heart and felt its small, honest weight. Never mistake silence for peace. I'd grown up under that sentence like a roof. Today it was a doorway. Rows of blues filled the room. Officers, recruits, reporters with notebooks instead of cameras. My mother sat near the aisle, hands folded, brave in the way only a long-kept truth can be. The program called for a montage, safe music, safe faces. I stepped to the podium and cut the feed. The screen blinked, then steadied on Morse's final encrypted file, recovered from the backup he'd hidden from men who preferred ashes to evidence. A timestamp from 1991 burned at the bottom. Papers changed hands in a frame that had aged 30 years without losing its nerve. Vance appeared, younger only in face. He signed with the briskness of someone approving the weather, and his voice carried, unmistakable. "Consider it handled. The man's gone." Gasps rippled like wind across flags. Pens lifted. Every eye went to Vance. His color rose, his mouth flattened into the kind of smile used on subordinates and subpoenas. I didn't address him. I addressed the room, and the ledger of the last 3 decades. I unfolded my father's letter, the crease worn smooth by nights I hadn't slept, and read, "Courage isn't loud. Sometimes, it's the act of being heard once." Vance started shouting classification and manipulation, the legalese of retreat. The chair of the ethics board stood, voice firm enough to stop a tide, formal suspension pending criminal inquiry. The note-takers wrote harder. Somewhere behind me a recruit exhaled like a prayer. Theo crossed the aisle with the steadiness of a sailor on a moving deck and placed the restored decree in front of me. "Commander Elias Whitlow," reinstated posthumously. My pen met the line. The small, clean sound of ink against paper echoed like a gavel, and for a heartbeat, I swear the portraits leaned closer. I looked out at the faces, old salt, new resolve, and let the words come the way truth comes when it refuses to wait any longer. We wear this uniform to protect the truth, not to hide from it. My father didn't die for silence. He lived for conscience. Applause rose, not the wild kind, but the kind that stands on its own legs. I saw tears brightening metals. I saw my mother close her eyes and finally breathe. Weeks later, the marina in Wilmington was a quieter witness. Dawn lifted a pale seam along the horizon. My mother slipped her arm through mine. I held my father's compass, the brass warm from my palm, and let it go. It turned once like a thought finding its end and disappeared into the green. Back at the house, a letter from the board waited. Reassignment to the Naval Ethics Division, training new officers whose first oath would name the right enemy. Justice came late, but it came clean. And sometimes, that's enough to let the ocean rest. When you finish my story, I hope you'll see a part of yourself in it. The part that's been told to stay quiet when truth demanded a voice. I carried silence for decades because I thought it was loyalty. But loyalty without honesty is only fear dressed in uniform. If you believe in me, believe in the idea that integrity isn't lost in systems, it's preserved by people. Speak when it costs you something. That's how honor survives.